Today I'm going to be reading two stories. This first one is titled The Man Behind the Shades. So this might get a little too long, but I really feel like the backstory is necessary for this story to be interesting. For 10 years of my childhood, I lived in an expensive suburb in Norway. It was a nice neighborhood, but for some reason it had a lot of issues with kidnapping and pedophiles. During the 10 years I lived there, 6 were arrested and charged, while a dozen more were spotted. Most of them were just hanging around schools, exposing themselves and stuff, but there were people trying to pull kids into their cars as well. Because of these frequent problems, our school even had its own routine to deal with this. We didn't walk home alone, we didn't get to talk to any adults stopping by or anything like that. When my dad tried to pick me up from school, he sometimes had to say something only a parent would know, such as, "We had pasta for dinner yesterday," or "Her brother's sick today." Then they would go ask me if it was correct. Now, around the time this story takes place, there had been a green car spotted around playgrounds. There was a man driving it who would park for hours without getting out of the car, just watching the kids. Some had also noticed that the license plate at the front and the back of the car didn't match. One day, my brother arrived at school to hear some shocking news. A girl in his class, a first grader, I was in the 4th grade by the way, had met the man in the green car and started talking to him. Long story short, he pulled her into the car through the driver's door. Luckily, she was smart enough to climb over the seats while he got in and escaped through the passenger door. Obviously, she would be taking time off from school for a while. After this, me and a friend were quite scared to be home alone, so we started hanging out at my place every day until our parents came home, just to have some company. This is where my experiences come in. Every day when we walked home from school, we would see the same black car parked at various places around our neighborhood. Sometimes the engine would be running, but the windows were too dark to see if there was someone there. As we were only warned about a lime green car at the time, we weren't that nervous, but we did discuss the topic. Honestly, I think we found it a bit exciting, like we were in a mystery novel. Now, the car would be parked close by quite often. It looked like a nice, expensive kind, and this was an expensive place to live, so we figured it was just neighbors. But then, a couple weeks after the girl had escaped the man in the green car, he still wasn't caught, despite a sketch of him being released and the license plates were being searched for. We got home to my house, and there it was, the black car. It was parked halfway on our driveway, halfway on the street, but the engine was off. We tried walking a little closer, but couldn't see anyone in it. After a while, we unlocked the door and found that the alarm was still on, so we figured we were safe. But we locked the door behind us and went to watch TV, but we didn't consider is that the alarm only worked downstairs. After a while, we heard something that made our skin crawl. Footsteps, loud and clear, 1 floor above us, where there was another living room. We looked at each other, and there was no doubt we'd heard the same thing. I called my mother, whispering that someone was there. As she knew I was a nervous child and there had been false alarms before, she told us to count to 10 and forget about it. Probably just the open window slamming, she said. Open window is the key word. We turned up the volume and did as she said, but the noises just got louder. I told myself that it was all in my head, but when the steps turned into voices, we panicked. I couldn't really make out what was said, but I do remember this.
"There's a couple of kids down there,"
was said by a male voice, and later the same voice said,
"Are you crazy?"
Obviously, we got the hell out of that house once we realized that the voices didn't come from the TV as we first thought. The show was in English, but the voices were speaking Norwegian. Again, I called my mother, and this time she took me seriously and said she'd be home in 10. We heard the footsteps on the stairs and doors and ran behind some bushes in our yard. From here, we could see the back of the house. A short while after squatting down, my friend crying silently, me being petrified, we saw a man walking around our house. He was wearing shades, so I can't say anything for certain, but I am pretty sure it was the guy from the drawing I'd seen in the papers. He was scanning the surroundings for a while. We were both scared half to death. For a minute, I was sure he'd seen us, but then there was a loud crashing noise and he ran around the house.
"Idiots,"
he said with a growly voice. He was quite young as well, actually. It would have surprised me if he'd turned 30. In the next minute, we heard the black car starting and driving away. Another van, a huge white one, started up behind the house, and another driveway of an unfinished house and drove away. We stared at it. 3 men were sitting in it, one young one in shades. I'm positive it was the same guy, and again, I could have sworn he saw us, and he smiled directly towards us. We remained in those bushes until we saw my mother's BMW entering the driveway. The cops showed up just after. They had found all our garden furniture, which was a table and some chairs, piled up at the back of the house. They'd use it to climb through the open window in my mom's bedroom. They'd walked around with muddy boots, messing up every single room. In my bedroom, a carpet had been rolled up, some books were torn out on the shelf, my duvet was on the floor, and one of my Barbie dolls had drawings on her face. A couple of days later, a neighbor had a similar break-in. That house and mine was, not to boast, the two most expensive in the area. After that, we never heard about it again. The men were never caught, nor was the green car guy. The weirdest thing about this, though, was that the only thing missing from our house was one little piece of jewelry. They had opened a box containing several $1,000s worth of jewelry and only taken that little bronze after nearly an hour spent in my house. This really makes me wonder what their intentions were. This second story is titled, Boy in My Living Room. When 6th grade ended, I moved from private school to public. It was about October at the time, and I had made several friends from my neighborhood. We hung out after school most days, riding bikes, going to the local park, etc. I got home from school on the bus around 3 o'clock, but my mom didn't get home until 3:30 or 4. I wasn't allowed to have anyone over or go out till she got home. On this particular day, my mom had told me she was going to be late. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone, so I got the house phone and called one of my closest friends, Andrew, to let everyone know I wouldn't be hanging out that day. My group consisted of myself, Beth, Leslie, Isaac, Brady, Andrew, and Josh. After informing my friends I wouldn't be able to see them that day, I made my way upstairs to the shower. I had been in the shower for about 15 minutes when I heard a huge bang from downstairs. I remember thinking that maybe it was my mom, but as I was halfway down the stairs wrapped in only a towel, I remembered she wouldn't be home until at least 5 o'clock that night. I panicked and ran back upstairs to find something heavy to defend myself with if worse came to worse. The only object I could find was a math textbook that had been laying on my floor. Deciding it was better than nothing, although a bat would have been more preferable, I raced downstairs into the living room. Lo and behold, standing in the middle of my living room was Brady, extremely angry, asking what the fuck he was doing in my house, especially when he knew that no one would be home. He chuckled and shrugged like it was some kind of joke, responding with, I just thought you should know that your back door was unlocked. Swearing like a sailor, I told him to get out of my house. As soon as he left, I locked the door and made sure the front door as well as all of our windows were secure. Later I found out from Andrew that Brady had broken into my house, entering from a window on 3 other occasions. Nothing had been stolen, and Andrew had no idea what Brady had done while he had been in my house. After this happened, I told my parents, who were just as upset as I had been. My friends and I cut off all contact with Brady after that. My parents never pressed any charges or anything, but my dad said he would if he ever saw Brady on our property again. Thankfully, I haven't heard anything from him since that happened 5 years ago. Brady, let's never meet. Hey guys, if you have any recommendations on what I should read next, or any ideas on how I can improve my videos, or the channel in general, please post it in the comments below. I look forward to you guys enlightening me on scarier stories to read. Thank you all for your support.